The Toronto Raptors trading OG Anunoby to the New York Knicks caught a lot of people by surprise. The team that's currently suing the Raptors with an owner who despises Raptors president Masai Ujiri for fleecing him multiple times. A man who actively hates MLSE president Larry Tannenbaum so much that he resigned from the NBA board over allegations that the NBA commissioner Adam Silver had conspired to protect him. The $10 million lawsuit, which was seen as an ultimate middle finger to Toronto, dragging the OG can do the same thing. The Raptors aren't a major free agent destination for most players, but they have a boatload of expiring contracts. And if they trade Pascal Siakam for expiring contracts and young assets to restock the coffers, not to mention future picks, as they're widely rumored to be willing to do, they will be one of the few teams this offseason that can make a very competitive offer to OG Anunoby.
All right. Enough. They said I was crazy, but these things do tend to happen where, once in a while, I think I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and this OG thing, it never made sense from the jump. So some big news today. We're gonna do three things in this episode. One, we're gonna talk about this OG Anunoby stuff because I do think that the Toronto Raptors, if he leaves the New York Knicks, I think the Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors are the leading, leading teams in terms of places where he fits, places where he'd be comfortable, places where he knows somebody, and places that I can actually afford to keep him and where he makes sense with the roster. And we're going to talk about WNBA, everything that happened today in terms of, the press conference and a little tidbit about the New York Knicks and the WNBA expansion team. And finally, we'll end this episode off on a really cool thing. It's a thought experiment on who is the best second option in the NBA. I'm going to rank out every single team's second option. So that's going to be pretty much a 30-minute episode. Try to do it rapid fire. Try to keep the pace up. Let's talk about OG Anunoby to the Toronto Raptors. Can it happen? Well, first things first, in order for him to get to the Raptors, he has to first leave the New York Knicks. And I was told up and down by Knicks fans 4 months ago that is never going to happen. There's one thing that New Yorkers can never understand, which is why would anyone want to leave New York? I think it's a lot of something that Americans can't understand. Why would anyone want to leave America? Well, if there is somebody who would want to leave, it would be a British-born Nigerian who kind of grew up in Toronto. You know what I mean? Who has close ties to this organization, who has a close relationship with this organization. Look, this report is coming out by Jake Fischer. This is the same guy who had been reporting for, I think, about a year and a half that OG Anunoby wanted a bigger role. There's clearly a connection here between Jake Fischer breaking news and it being right about OG Anunoby. So here's the thing. OG Anunoby did not have a bigger role with New York. He had a huge impact defensively, but he already had a huge impact defensively here. He already made a second team all defense here. He was already regarded as the premier 3-and-D defender here. I know he got a little bit more spotlight in New York because it's New York, but the truth is, in terms of expanding his offensive game and all that stuff, that didn't really happen in New York. I think a couple of things work in Toronto's favor, and we'll talk about the report. But a couple of things work in Toronto's favor. Number one is the existing relationship that's already there between him and Masai, the trust that exists. You cannot tell me that trust could be built that quickly. The Raptors never steered him wrong. They never lied to him. They kept him straight shooter. They even made a deal to get him to a destination he allegedly wanted to go to, and put him in a great position. And of course, I cannot deny his relationship with Scottie Barnes is like some next level shit. Like, Scottie was bummed for months after OG was traded. He did not see that same, bumming out like after Fred VanVleet was gone. So the OG thing was a really important thing. And also, in terms of what the Raptors need, I mean, we spent all offseason talking about, the Raptors really need to plug this hole left by OG Anunoby. Where will they find this player? Will they find it in the second round, the first round? Will they find it by trading for Herb Jones? Will they find it by trying to trade for Trey Murphy? Well, we're ignoring a giant elephant in the room, that there is an OG Anunoby type player in free agency, and the Raptors have free agency, dollars. They have money. And that player who is like OG Anunoby is OG Anunoby, okay? And he kind of fits the timeline too. It made sense to move on from Fred. It made sense to move on from Pascal. If you're readjusting to Scottie's timeline, that all made sense. The only reason that it made sense to trade OG is if OG asked out. And I just don't believe that he wanted out. Because if Pascal is on the move, then OG Anunoby has all the shots. Why would he leave? It didn't make sense in the jump, okay? The only way it makes sense is if it was a rental. Now, the WNBA component of it. Scotty Barnes was on hand. Kyle Lowry was on hand. Olivia Chow, I believe, was on hand. Justin Trudeau was on hand. Everyone was on hand as the WNBA opened their doors in Toronto. We get word of where the team's going to play and all that stuff that had already broken, but it's all official now. And everyone's there, and there is this thing where they said that there was a unanimous vote, almost unanimous vote for NBA expansion or WNBA expansion to Toronto. What's the one team that voted against WNBA expansion in Toronto? New York. Go figure, right? It's not even a team that didn't have, right? They had it. They have the New York Liberty, and they still voted against. So this lawsuit thing that is still pending between the Knicks and the Raptors was so petty between these two organizations that they couldn't even give them a fucking vote for expansion. They had to block that too. It's not even MLSC. It's a completely different group. I mean, in theory, it's a completely different group, but it's kind of like, similar faces. They couldn't even give them the vote. But apparently we gave them like the defensive savior they've been looking for years. Give me a break. Okay, give me a break. The Toronto Raptors, in theory, if OG is healthy, built an Eastern Conference semifinalist to finalist perennially around Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Isaiah Hartenstein, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart. Look, if you're the Toronto Raptors, you're not beating that team for the next 3 years. Why would you resurrect such a great team? Look at the Toronto Raptors. In theory, I mean, they traded Pascal because of desperation, but OG, it wasn't like desperation, man. You had plenty of suitors for OG. Plenty of suitors. Why send him to New York? Why send him in your conference? Why send him in your division? Why send him to a division rival? Why send him to a team that is actively suing you that you cannot stand? I mentioned it in that video. Masai Ujiri was seething when he addressed that New York thing. So you're telling me he signed off to send his, here's the thing. When a team does this kind of bush league thing to you, you develop a bit of a reputation for what that team's like behind the scenes. You develop a sort of disdain for their organization, for, their culture, for their management. Why would you send your prodigal son? Why would you send your favorite Raptor? I don't care what he says about Scotty and how much you love Scotty. OG is like his guy. His face is lit up for 7 years when he's talked about OG, okay? Why would you send that player to an organization you don't respect? You know what I mean? Okay. If there's anyone who deserves it, it's the Knicks. Let me put that part out for sure. The Knicks tamper like madness. Okay. The fact that Leon Rose is, son is OG's agent, that's technically tampering in a way, isn't it? I mean, look, the Raptors kind of got tampered with a couple times already. Okay. They had the whole Kawhi getting lured to the Clippers, Lawrence Frank coming in. So the Raptors kind of got cucked in that situation, right? Sorry to excuse my language, but it's weird, right? You're there, you're wooing your girl. This other guy's just in the background, like, hey, remember me? Nice to see you. Like that's what Lawrence Frank was for Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors. And the Raptors somehow just let that go, right? They won a championship, they let that go. And now you got Leon Rose's son, this whole cabal that they're building up, trying to woo your potential free agent to sign him away from Clutch, giving him all sorts of promises. And the Raptors probably looking at this like say, bet. All right, let's get in on this. Look, if OG Anunoby returns to the Knicks, I will straight up just say I was wrong. I was just wrong. If he comes to Toronto, I'll be thrilled. But I don't want to say sure, but I'm pretty confident whether he goes to Toronto or whether he goes elsewhere, that the possibility of leaving New York is very real. Let's talk about the thing here. NBA Central's report. There's no guarantee that OG Anunoby will re-sign with New York, and he is expected to consider other offers from other teams per Jake Fischer. While league personnel are of the mind Siakam will certainly be re-signing with Indiana, and I have never made any notion that he wouldn't. There was word circling among NBA team officials at last week's NBA draft combine that Anunoby's situation with the Knicks is not as cut and dry. Various teams left Chicago with the belief that Anunoby could reach unrestricted free agency and consider deals from other franchises in addition to New York, sources said. Okay, here's my question for you. Was there ever any real debate that Jalen Brunson was going to New York? Be for real now. Was there ever a debate? No. I would have bet my house and every house after that and probably my firstborn namesake. I would have bet so much that Jalen Brunson was going to New York. It was cut and dry. That was cut and dry. I would bet a lot that Pascal Siakam is going to re-sign with the Indiana Pacers. But this OG to New York thing never made sense to me. It continues. He will likely decline the player option and become a free agent. Let me correct that. He will definitely decline that player option. The Knicks can ink Anunoby to a max deal of 5 years, $245, as Golson explains in his recent breakdown. Golson uses the recent deals for wings like Jeremy Grant and Jay McDaniels as a reference for owning Anunoby's next deal. He expects Anunoby's deal to set the market for wings. I think it's reasonable to expect Anunoby to get $35 million annually on his next contract. If that number is eye-popping, remember that the NBA's next TV rights deal will steadily increase salary cap because, quote, because of the new television contract that begins in 25-26, teams expect to see cap increase annually by 10%. ESPN's Bobby Marks notes in his excellent Knicks breakdown. Finally, Anunoby can sign an extension worth $117 million over 4 years on June 30th, the 6-month anniversary of his Knicks trade. He has a player option for 24-25. He needs to decide on that player option by June 24th and can only extend if he exercises the player option for next season. You can probably take that option off the board for the Knicks. It's highly unlikely to pick up his option for next season. Okay, so here's the thing. If you are the Philadelphia 76ers or the Toronto Raptors, this has to be your top guy. The Sixers have Tyrese Maxey. They have Joel Embiid. Anunoby fits like a glove. If anyone knows what he can do for a team in terms of floor raising, it is Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse understands how great OG Anunoby is. And so I expect OG Anunoby to get a really strong offer from the Sixers. And frankly, if the Sixers don't offer him, damn near a max contract, if not a full-on max contract, I think they'd be crazy. He fits very well. Durability issues aside, what happened in the playoffs this year aside, all that stuff aside, he fits too well that if he's healthy in the playoffs, he takes you to that next level. And he and Joel Embiid, like those are two of the best defenders in the NBA. Putting them together would be crazy. Okay. What about the Toronto Raptors angle of this? Well, I could argue that you've replaced a lot of what you lost with Fred and Pascal. Not as good, but much cheaper and much younger in Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. The conversion of Barrett and Pascal may seem laughable to some people, especially Pascal superfans who see him as some sort of superstar, but he's really not a superstar. He is like a star. And if you're going to tell me that RJ Barrett can replace some of the offensive load and slashing and shot making that Pascal did, granted, not nearly as efficient, but maybe, he shot 40% from three as a Raptor. Maybe RJ Barrett can be. He's also 23. Pascal Siakam, where was he at 23? Maybe you can develop RJ into that. And by the way, he's not making $50 million. He's not making 45. He's making 26, 27. Same thing with Immanuel Quickley. I think his next deal sets in around 25, 26. So you technically get RJ and Immanuel Quickley for the same price as you would have gotten Pascal total. Are those two players worth Pascal? I don't know, but they're much younger, and there's two of them. I don't know. I think they are. I would trade Immanuel Quickley, and I wouldn't trade if I'm the Pacers. Maybe the Pacers, it's a different situation. They already have Tyrese Halliburton, but if I'm a random team, am I trading RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley away to get Pascal Siakam? I would have to think about that a lot, and I'd probably say no. So what you're really missing right now, and again, you can argue that they replaced a little bit of the defensive, upside that they lost with Fred VanVleet, the younger Fred VanVleet, by getting a rim protecting center like Jakob Poeltl, and maybe getting like some, vets like Kelly Olynyk. Kelly Olynyk gets a lot of slack for, people say he's a really bad defender. He's not a bad defender. He's a really good defender. So really what you're missing right now is point of attack defense, 3-point shooting, positional versatility, someone who can take the load defensively off of Scotty Barnes. You're missing OG Anunoby. You're missing OG Anunoby in the worst way. And you have a new option, a new pathway open to you right now, because previously the Raptors were going to have quite a bit of cap space. they're going to have even more cap space now because they surrender that pick that was going to be a pretty high pick, sixth, fifth, sixth, fourth, third, second, first. That was the protection. That's 12 million, 11 million, 10 million, 8 million. That's like a sizable chunk. That's almost the full mid-level exception, right? That's a lot of money. So the Toronto Raptors fully can get under, like, by renouncing Gary. They don't even have to trade Boucher and Jalen Daniels. Like, they have the space. They have the space. And here's the thing with Scotty's extension coming in, and he could very well ascend to like all NBA level and command a supermax, right? So you don't want to risk like losing this one summer where you actually have cap space. So we all knew the Raptors were going to do something with their cap space. Are they going to take on a big contract like Ben Simmons and take on a whole bunch of draft picks? Yeah, that's one way to do it. That's certainly one way to do it. Are they going to take a super, bloated 1-year contract and then try to trade at the deadline for some team that's desperate to get under the cap? Well, I mean, look around at the NBA and look at the $25 to $30 million range of players and find me a player that even fits the mold of what you're trying to do. I'm not seeing one, unless, of course, you're going to take Pascal Siakam back now 2 years older. I'm not really sure. Like, who are you going to take? Ben Simmons, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins? Like, these are the names that get floated around. Zach LaVine, like, OG Anunoby better than all those players. So why not just sign OG? Why not just sign OG? You have the perfect pitch to him. I guarantee you, he and Scotty giggle that entire free agency pitch meeting. Masai Ujiri, the straight shooter, Darko Rajakovic, you mean the coach that invested in him every single day, worked with him one-on-one. You know how rare it is in the NBA for a coach who knows that a guy is on his way out to devote daily attention to that guy, working with him to make him a better player. Look, man, the vibes are back in Toronto. A lot of the stuff that bugged OG about being here, the lack of touches, Fred, potentially hogging the ball, a lot of that stuff is gone. I'm not saying he had a bad relationship with Pascal. I'm sure his relationship with Pascal was fine. But ultimately, if you want more shots, the leading shot taker being gone is going to help you. So it's nice. OG Anunoby goes to New York, gets a little bit of clout, leaves, becomes enemy number one. That makes you pretty big in terms of just awareness, a lot of PR. But I never bought this thing about OG who needs to be in the Mecca. You mean the unassuming guy who barely ever posts on social media is suddenly sorry for attention? That guy? You mean the guy who barely ever does any interviews? The guy who barely ever draws any attention to himself? The most quiet, unreserved guy who gives one-word answers in post-game scrums? That's the guy who's dying for limelight in the Mecca? Come on, man. OG Anunoby never made sense in New York. He makes sense from a basketball fit, but not if it comes at this cost. So, look, there's no reason ever for OG Anunoby and his representatives to put out a rumor like this. There's no reason for Jake Fischer to run with it if it's totally false. There's no reason for executives to believe this if there isn't something there. There's that old adage, there's smoke, there's fire. Well, when it comes to OG Anunoby and the Knicks, dude, his agent is the freaking, guy's son, okay? There's no bluffing here. There's no bluffing. Who are you bluffing? You're bluffing yourself. So really, this is, and every time people brought this up, be like, Rob, he's Leon Rose's son. His agent is Leon Rose's son. And I always had the same response. For 4 months, I've had the same response. And he won't be the first agent to get fired. Dude, it could happen. I don't mean to throw salt in the wound, Knicks fans. Y'all been real chirpy about, making the Eastern Conference finals or almost getting to the Eastern Conference finals. And I was with you. I really liked what the Knicks did this year. But I think if you're OG Anunoby, you have to look at yourself. You have to look at your body. You have to look at the load that you took. Multiple injuries in a very short stint with New York. A lot of minutes. Huge physical load. I think if you're Knicks, you can also look at this and say, is this something we want to sign up for? Best case scenario, right? If you are the Toronto Raptors, your interest in OG is going to make the Knicks have to offer more. Unless, of course, Leon Rose's son is going to go to OG Anunoby and say, yeah, Philly's willing to offer you 45. Toronto's going to offer you 45, but I'm encouraging you to take 32 with the Knicks. Come on now. Is OG stupid? Is OG dumb? You think OG is stupid? See, this is the thing. A lot of athletes are stupid. I hate to say that way, but it's true. A lot of them probably couldn't pass a grade 7 math test. OG is not one of those guys. OG is very smart. OG reads. OG is a genius. Actually, OG is low key very, very genius. I've heard a lot of stories about him off the scenes. I'm not going to talk about them, but this is a really smart dude. Man, like when I say smart, I mean problem solving, chess genius level smart. OG is a really smart guy. So he is not taking less money to be with the Knicks. When I heard that, I nearly laughed out loud. I was like, then they're paying him under the table, or they're paying him via an endorsement. They're paying him some other way, and the NBA better find out about it. This guy is not going to take way less money to play in New York. It just doesn't make sense. So I confidently declare that if the Toronto Raptors and the Philadelphia 76ers aggressively pursue OG, there is a legitimate chance that he leaves New York. And if his agent won't sign the fucking contract, there's thousands of agents that are willing to take him on who definitely will. Sign me, OG. Sign me as your agent. I'll bring you right back to Toronto. All right. Now let's get to some comments real quick. I did spend a considerable amount of yesterday's live and the previous live kind of losing my mind at the comments. So frankly, I'm not going to be reading comments as much anymore. If you got something you really, really want me to say, I don't mean to be greedy or something, we're probably going to have to super chat it. I get way too derailed with all the comments, so I'm not trying to be rude. It's just, yeah. Also, let's get to the final part of this video now that we're actually on track to end this within 30 minutes. The best Robin in the NBA. All right. Couldn't help but notice yesterday as Kyrie Irving was dusting everybody and, thinking like how great a player Kyrie is. Who's the best Robin in the NBA? So, I made this poll on Twitter and I was asking around, like, who's the best Robin in the NBA? Who's the best second option in the NBA? And I didn't really ask that. I said, who's the best Robin still remaining? So it's between Karl-Anthony Towns, Pascal Siakam, Kyrie Irving, and Jaylen Brown. And it got me thinking, it's like, who really is the best and who's the worst? And does having a really bad second option, in theory, does that make you a worse team? Is there a correlation between really bad teams and really bad second options? I think, a little bit of a weird question, because obviously if your second option is bad, it increases the chances that your first option might not be so great either. You know what I mean? It's only a second option to somebody. So let's talk about the worst second, the best to the worst, and we'll start with number 30. I was going to do this as a video, and I still might do this as a video, like a standalone video. But let's get to it. So let me know in the comments, who is the worst second option in the league? I'm curious to know what you guys think. I'll actually read the comments for a second there. I ranked out every single second option in the NBA, and I came up with the worst second option being DeAndre Ayton for the Portland Trailblazers. Now, this is straight up hating. There's a very good case to be made that some of the guys above him are technically worse. DeAndre Ayton didn't have the worst season. Spooky Ghostwriter saying whoever's in Washington, well, we'll get to Washington very soon. But in terms of box plus minus, 0.3 box plus minus and a 1 value of a replacement. Not a really great season for DeAndre Ayton. And quite frankly, it didn't quite work out in Phoenix. I don't really think he cares that very much about basketball. He's never going to live up to the billing as the number 1 overall pick. And frankly, I think wherever he goes, if he leaves, they get better. So, all right. Jason Williams saying Ivy. So this is the other thing. Let me address this. It's really hard sometimes to pick who is the number 2 option, right? So there was 2 ways to go about this. You could either consider Robin as the second leading creator, shot taker, usage guy, which makes some sense, in which case, you would go with a guy like Jaden Ivey. But then would you go with Tyler Hero over Bam Adebayo because he takes more shots? You know what I mean? Like, so I went with the second best player because I think there are different ways to be good on the basketball court other than taking shots. So number 30 is DeAndre Ayton. Number 29 is Miles Bridges from the Charlotte Hornets. I debated, and honestly, 26 through 30 can be inverted in different ways. I consider them a bunch of just guys who shouldn't be second options ever. Miles Bridges should be your 4th to 5th best player. The fact that he's your second best player It's going to hurt you defensively as well. But he was adjusting back to the NBA. He didn't play for a while. Think he's a solid player, but not as a second option. 28, Jalen Duren from the Detroit Pistons. I love Jalen Duren. I think he's a fantastic young player. He's super young right now. So I think that he'll ascend. Analytically, of course, Jalen Duren negative 0.1, boxes minus 0.9 value of replacement. Those are not bad numbers for a 20-year-old by any means. 27, Nick Claxton. So I put some notes. So for DeAndre Ayton, I put Brogdon, Grant. Like, is Jeremy Grant the number 2 option? Is Malcolm Brogdon? Who is the number 1? Who's the number 2? There's a world in which you say Anthony Simons is number 1 and DeAndre Ayton number 2. And there's a world where you say Anthony Simons is number 1, Brogdon's number 2. You could say Brogdon's number 1, Simons is number 2, DeAndre Ayton's number 3. Like, it's weird. Miles Bridges, same thing. Is it Miller or is it Mark Williams? Is Mark Williams the second most impactful player, or is it Brandon Miller, or is it Miles Bridges? I went with Bridges. Jalen Duren, same thing. You could say, is it Jaden Ivey or Asar Thompson? Like, in terms of their most impactful players, could Asar Thompson be considered a more impactful player than Jalen Duren? Maybe if he learns to shoot next year, he will definitely be. Nick Claxton, the same thing. Cam Ben. The Nets have a really weird construction where they have Mikal Bridges, who is, in my opinion, a really solid second option. And then they have like 5 guys who could be like a solid third or fourth option. Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, Ben Simmons, potentially, if he ever gets healthy. So there's a lot of, but I put Nick Claxton there. They didn't really use him well, but analytically, defensively, I think he made the second most impact. So it's a 1.2, boxes minus 1.7 value of replacement. Number 26, I put Denny Avdia for the Washington Wizards. Honestly, Denny is one of those players where I think immediately you put him on a better team, and people are going to start talking to him like the star role player. Like, a lot of players who've left Washington have looked better elsewhere. I just think it's hard to be on a team where Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole are your leading shot takers. Number 25, Devin Vassell. Not even close, right? It's 1.1 value of replacement, 0. He's clearly the second best player on that team behind Victor Wembanyama. Number 24, Utah's Colin Sexton. 1.9 box minus 2.0 value of replacement. I could go with Colin Sexton over Immanuel Quickley, honestly, but I decided to put Immanuel Quickley above him. Number 23, IQ, Immanuel Quickley. So, honestly, I debated hard about putting Immanuel Quickley over Kobe White, but I think Kobe White had like a really solid year, and I think he just showed a little bit more than Immanuel Quickley at times. But right now, thinking about it, I think I want to put Kobe White 23 and put Immanuel Quickley 22. Number 21, Draymond Green. Really hard to think about who is really the second most important and who's the second guy in Washington in Golden State, because it's Steph Curry, and then it should be Klay Thompson, but Klay Thompson's fallen off, and it should be Andrew Wiggins, but Andrew Wiggins has fallen off, and it should be Jonathan Kuminga, but he's not there yet. So for now, it's still Draymond Green. Number 20, Brandon Ingram, probably a lot lower than people expected him to be, and frankly, a lot lower than I expected him to be, but he's there. And it's not just because, I think, geez, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna put Julius Randle below him. So Julius Randle at 20. Julius Randle did not have the greatest year, but he's still a solid shooter, still a solid scorer. It just, at times, it's hard to ignore how well the Knicks do without him. But they did really well with him as well. And he is, he does bring some value to that. And as a shooter at his size, as a scorer, I think, buckets are important, in the NBA. It's number 19, Brandon Ingram. A lot of people really love BI, and I love him too. He has this smooth game, a super shot making, kind of reminds you of Kevin Durant, but like a muted version. And you might think, hey, like BI in a solid, second option role next to, Zion Williamson. But really, it feels sometimes that they just take turns being the guy, So Brandon Ingram is number 19. Number 18 is DeJounte Murray. Solid season, 3.6 boxes minus 2.6 value of replacement. I think he was a very big part of what went right and wrong in Atlanta this year. Yes, the defense has fallen off a little bit since his San Antonio days. I don't think the numbers are necessarily telling you the whole picture in terms of, how bad he was defensively at times, especially. And I think the fit with Trae Young, is somewhat clunky. But if the Hawks do move on from Trae Young, it'll largely be because, they believe that DeJounte Murray can man the one. Number 17, Fred VanVleet. I think a lot of people will be surprised that I have Fred VanVleet this high. Frankly, I'm surprised that he's this low, but 3.4 box plus minus, 3.6 value replacement. The only question is he the first option or the second option in Houston, or is Alperen Şengün the first option? They're very similar in terms of impact this year. And it's hard to ignore, how ball dominant he was at times, running the pick and roll with Alperen Şengün. And, did that hurt or did that help Jalen Green? Did that hurt? Did that help Jabari Smith? But it is impossible to ignore the fact that, this is a team that got better. Obviously, you can spread apart, the credit for that to Ime, to him, to Dylan Brooks, whoever you want to. You can credit it to the growth of Alperen Şengün. You can say it's all four things. But one thing is for sure, the numbers say that Fred VanVleet was the single biggest reason for Houston's turnaround. Number 16, Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, I really struggled to put him this low, and frankly, I don't think he'll ever be this low again on a list like this. And frankly, it's worth asking, is it him or is it Desmond Bane, who's the second guy, right? And he won Defensive Player of the Year. He wasn't a Defensive Player of the Year guy this year. He wasn't even close. His impact just dropped off a cliff. He was a 0.4 box plus minus guy with a 1.3 value replacement. They had him do a lot more offensively this year than they have in years past. And I think this was just a growing year for him, but I don't think he's completely lost the player that he was. And I think he's a fantastically talented player. And frankly, I would probably take him over a few guys above him on this list, but I can't ignore the fact that he had a really bad year. Number 15, Jared Allen in Cleveland. A lot of people expect this to be, Evan Mobley. Some people may say this should be Darius Garland. Behind Donovan Mitchell, I think the second most impactful Cav is Jared Allen, which makes the fact that he was missing in the playoffs all that more disastrous, because I do think they are a way worse team without him. We saw it last year too. When Jared Allen went out, their defense went to shit. So I think Jared Allen is super underrated. 3.0 box plus minus, 3.1 value replacement, just a really solid player. Number 14, Pascal Siakam. No surprises here. To me, every player above him is just way, way, way better defensively than him, or way better offensively, or just the aggregate impact of that player is just way ahead of him. So, 1.9 box plus minus, 2.7 value replacement. Someone, on the Twitter poll, they said that Pascal Siakam's actually been the best player for the Pacers, that Tyrese Halliburton been like his backup or his Robin. And to that I say, look, go to Basketball Reference. First of all, if you're watching the games, Pascal Siakam is not creating the majority of the offense. And that's really what being a first option is creating the majority of the offense. The majority of the offense for the Indiana Pacers is being created by TJ McConnell and Tyrese Halliburton. And if not that, then it is being created by Pascal Siakam in a third role, but he's a play finisher. And frankly, if you look at the analytics would say he's actually been their third best player behind Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton. And it's not that his numbers are not that much better in the playoffs, scoring wise, volume wise, box plus minus wise, than Obi Toppin. So really, like, all this stuff about Pascal Siakam having the greatest playoff run or whatever, miss me with that stuff, man. It's just not happening. But on the season, he was still better than almost every player that I named beneath him. Number 13, Franz Wagner. I'm very high on Franz. I think his defensive impact is awesome. And, some people would be really surprised to see him this high up, especially over guys like Pascal Siakam and maybe Fred VanVleet, DeJounte Murray, guys, Julius Randle, guys who just have more oomph. But I think the total impact of Franz, especially, when you consider the growth and where he's going with it, I think it's just cannot be understated. 1.2 box minus 1.9 value replacement is certainly low in this part of the range. But I think if you got a little bit more spacing around him, I think everyone's just thinking 1 for 15, right? Like what he shot in that game. But man, he's going to be better. And defensively, again, I don't think the numbers. Sometimes I went with the analytics. Sometimes I went against the analytics here. You can have you can have a guy like Devin Booker who's going to be above guys where their analytics are better than him, like a Jamal Murray. But it's just, you got to go with the feel thing. You got to go with like balancing everything out. You got to go in with what type of load they have, what type of situation they had, who was injured, what their system fit is like. So I just think Franz Wagner belongs in the top 15. Whether you want to put him behind Jared Allen and behind Pascal Siakam or above them, doesn't really matter to me, but he's in there. Number 12, This is going to be controversial. Jalen Williams, OKC Thunder. A lot of people think that he's already catapulted into like the top 5. I disagree. I think the playoffs exposed a little bit of that. I don't think he was like necessarily what he needed to be. Shea is definitely one of the top, 5, 6 players in the NBA. I don't think that Jalen Williams is quite there. And honestly, it would not surprise me if Chet Holmgren ends up being the better player between the two of them. Number 11. Now this, I'm going to have to say, yeah, I'm going to move this. Number 11, Karl Anthony Towns. 2.5 box plus minus, 2.3 value of a replacement. I think Karl Anthony Towns is a solid player. We saw him be really instrumental in shutting down defensively. Nikola Jokic, he was a big part of their scheme. He's been big in terms of shot making. He's really, I think he's reversed a lot of the narrative around him. So I think that was really solid, solid season from him, and he's been pretty good in the playoffs. Number 10, Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown. JB just signed a huge deal, and it's really hard to put him this low because I know that some of his numbers are lower because of the talent around him. And I think you can make a really solid case that Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis have at times had a greater impact on their success. What's not unclear to me is who their best player is, which is Jason Tatum, but it is unclear at times who their second best player is. And sometimes, you look at Jaylen Brown and he has a quarter or he has a half where he just goes ballistic as a shot maker. And just as a defender, sometimes you see his positional versatility and you just say, if this guy was running his own team, would that team be like really, really good? You know what I mean? But then sometimes you see the turnovers and you're like, no, there's a reason he's not running his own team. So, look, very, very smart people gave him a lot of money to be Jason Tatum's number 2. And I'm not going to say he's not the greatest number 2 or whatever, but I do think that the guys above him are better than him. Number 9, Jamal Murray from the Denver Nuggets, who just lost. Look, don't be a prisoner of the moment. Jamal Murray is a fantastic shot maker. I think he needs to work on his defense, but he's a good playmaker. He's like kind of that perfect combo guard. How much of his numbers are boosted because he plays with Jokic? I don't know. Because if you put Jaylen Brown in the same position as Jamal Murray, you can make a lot of arguments that, he might be better. It's really difficult, in my opinion, to differentiate between Jamal Murray, Karl Towns, and Jaylen Brown. What I'm very clear about is that they're not number 1 options. These aren't like the type of number 2s that should be number 1s, but they're just kind of taking a back seat. You get to that further up. Number 8, Bam Adebayo. 2.4 boxes minus, 2.7 value of replacement. I think a lot of people would probably put Bam below these guys, but I think it's because a lot of people don't value defense the way I do. His positional versatility, his ability to, shoot suddenly, like he can shoot a little bit now too. I think the only problem with Bam is not that he can't score 30 points, just that he doesn't score 30 points. I wonder if Jimmy Butler moves on and, we start to see him be more assertive offensively. If he can't put up 25 points efficiently, I think he's got a lot more in his game and his defense is elite. Number 7, but probably not going to be here for long, Damian Lillard. His defense was atrocious this past year. 2.7 value replacement and 2.1 boxes minus is like one of the largest single season fall offs. He was basically an MVP candidate in Portland individually. He was on that level. And for him to fall off this badly playing with Giannis, coaching change, personal stuff, divorce, etc. But I cannot ignore how good he has been in his career. He should be higher on this list. He should be damn near number 2 or number 3 on this list, but he did fall. But I cannot just use the numbers and say, well, he's 11th now. He's worse than Pascal Siakam. I can't do that. Damian Lillard is still Damian Lillard. Number 6, Paul George. Also a guy that I struggled with a lot. 6 and 5 are really close to me, but 3.2 boxes minus, 3.3 value of a replacement. I think Paul George is definitely one of the most underrated players in my lifetime. I think he's a fantastic player. Defensively, switchability, his playmaking is underrated. His shot making is underrated. There are times, where the Clippers offense just looks much better running through him. But I will say this, there are times this year where James Harden was much better than him. And so, you do wonder, like between the two of them, who is Kawhi's real number 2? Number 5, Devin Booker. Is Devin Booker the first option or the second option, or is that Kevin Durant? You know what I mean? Analytics say KD is the best player on that team. Defensively, he's the best. He elevates more. But obviously, the face of the franchise is Devin Booker. So you if you're going to put KD here, then KD goes up this list to number 4, or maybe number 3 or number 2, maybe number 2 actually. But if Devin Booker's here, he's firmly at number 5. Number 4, Tyrese Maxey. Playing off of Joel Embiid, who is an evolving passer, is not too unlike playing off of Nikola Jokic. I mean, granted, there's a vast difference between how they play make, but in terms of the advantages they generate and how much pressure they put on the defense and how much they allow guards, like especially dynamic guards like Tyrese Maxey and Jamal Murray, to get open, it's important. Tyrese Maxey, he kind of replaced James Harden in a way. Like, he's always been there, but James Harden moves on. Everyone says, oh my God, they lost James for nothing. They got all these role players. And then boom, Tyrese Maxey wins most improved player. I think he's one of the best young players in the league. Solid year, 3.1 boxes minus, 3.4 value of replacement. But this is the last place where you're going to see like these low numbers. The next 3 guys are just a tier up. And this is like the top tier, best second options in the NBA. Number 3, Domantas Sabonis. No. Analytically, you say Domantas Sabonis is the best player on the Kings, and De'Aaron Fox should be his number 2. But I watched the Kings enough to tell you that that's just not the case. They run a lot of their offense through Domantas Sabonis, but I think Fox is like the leading shot maker, creator for their offense. A lot of it works because, and like, it's very Murray Jokic, but Sabonis is not Jokic, right? So you can go either way on it. And if it is De'Aaron Fox, well, then De'Aaron Fox is like number 6 on this list. But if it's Sabonis, he's number 3. Number 2, Kyrie Irving. 4.9 boxes minus, 3.6 value of replacement, and doing it in all sorts of ways in the playoffs. He's bought in defensively. I think he's just been a really solid leader, like a veteran leader for their team. He has been really much more committed defensively. He has this insane creation ability off the dribble, just relentless counters. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on your defense. And I think he's one of the biggest reasons why the Dallas Mavericks are in the Western Conference Finals, despite the fact that Luka's having one of the worst playoff runs of his life. And number 1, you may not like him. Doesn't really fucking matter if you like him. He is the best number 2 option in the NBA, and that is Anthony Davis for the Los Angeles Lakers. 5.1 boxes minus, 4.9 value of a replacement. Really bested. Those numbers are bested only by Domantas Sabonis on this list. One of the best defenders in the NBA, had a pretty healthy season this year. Don't really like the pieces around him at times. And, you could argue he's a number 2 option, but he might be the Lakers' best player. And certainly, as LeBron moves into his 40s, it's hard to argue that LeBron will not eventually become, a top 5 guy on this list. But anyways, that is my Robins list. I'll probably consider making this into a video, but I don't know if it's necessarily fleshed out enough yet. And I'm pretty sure if I made this list tomorrow, some guys would move around. So I don't know. Congrats to Halliburton for his Supermax upgrade. Okay. Yeah, so Denny Avdia, honestly, very Scotty Barnes-esque. Like, defensively, he's friggin' phenomenal. Positional versatility is awesome. Shooting is going to come. I think he's just a really smart screener. Like, he just does not belong in Washington. Neither does Bilal Coulibaly, right? So they have, they have Tyus Jones. So they have like good players, and then they have Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole there, right? So, the number 2 pick this year, I don't know who they picked. They'll probably pick Alex Sarr, right? Zachary Rissochet is another option there. But, they got to move on from Jordan Poole, man. Contract be damned. Like, I'd buy that guy out and just get him off the team. He was one of the worst players in the NBA this year, and it's not even close. Like, analytically, he was one of the worst players in the NBA, and you're paying him a ton of money for a long period of time. And it's not the right presence to have around young players. And I think more so than anything, I'm most impressed by Denny's ability to stay so professional and be so, doing the right thing, even when people around him are doing the wrong thing. It's very difficult for a young player to do that. So, yeah, I would love for the Raptors to get Denny Avdia. More so than I would like for them to get Patrick Williams. I think I'm pretty much there on those two guys. I could sell myself on either or, but they're close in my mind, and that says a lot, right? So anyway, Daryl saying, did you mention the Spurs second option? Yes, number 25, Devin Vassell. So I put Devin Vassell below Emmanuel quickly. So let me just recap from OG has all the leverage. He will go to the team that offers him the most. This will be his last big payday. I don't know if this will be his last big payday, dude. He's like 26 or 27 years old. So if he signs a 4-year deal, he can still get like one more bump, provided he stays athletically coherent. Yeah. Anyways, I'll see y'all after the game tonight. It will be Indiana versus Boston. I expect my girlfriend asked me, she's like, who do you expect to win tonight? She asks me every single day who I expect. And usually I have an answer, but like, oh, I expect this to win or that to win. Yesterday, it's like I expect Dallas to win. I don't have a read on this game tonight, and that scares me. I guess we'll know in the first quarter, whether the Pacers kind of have a hangover after what happened in the last game or whether or not they come out really motivated and committed. Again, I expect the Celtics to drop a game. I think they already dropped it. The Pacers just didn't finish. So, if the Celtics have kind of been on red alert, or maybe the Celtics are one of those teams that has to lose a game before they take shit seriously. I don't know. But yes, there are tactical advantages that the Celtics, that I mentioned in the previous post game that the Indiana Pacers have over the Boston Celtics, and I expect them to spam pick and roll crazy tonight. But yes, I fully think Indiana can win a game in Boston. All right. Bruce saying it's just because the situation between Siakam and Fred that I want Boston to win. It pains me to say that. I don't really care, to be honest. I'm not really. Do you think Kyle will sign the Toronto? Are you saying that because he's here for the WNBA announcement? No, I don't. All right. It would be interesting to have him as one last. But here's a question for you to just as we exit this video, let me know what you think the Raptors record would be with the following lineup. Okay. Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, OG Anunoby, Pascal. Whoops. Let me start that again. Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes at small forward, OG Anunoby at the 4, Jakob Poeltl at the 5, Grady off the bench, Olynyk off the bench, Ochai off the bench. Let me know how many wins you think that's going to be. All right. Peace, guys.